It didn't start with a speech or a breaking news alert flashing across television screens. It started with something far quieter and far more unsettling. A pattern. Small signals scattered across the skies and seas of the Middle East. A radar contact that suddenly disappeared. A military port that went silent. A ship that stopped transmitting. A convoy that never reached its destination. At first, those signals looked unrelated, almost random. But inside military command rooms, analysts quickly realized they were pieces of a much larger picture. Something unusual was unfolding across one of the most strategic waterways on the planet, the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, where nearly a fifth of the world's oil passes every day. For decades, this narrow corridor has been one of the most militarized shipping lanes on Earth. Tankers, warships, surveillance aircraft, submarines, and drones constantly move through the same tense waters. And in the center of that pressure sat the Iranian Navy, built around fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, and asymmetric tactics designed to disrupt global shipping if a conflict ever erupted. For years, Western analysts believed that even if Iran couldn't win a naval war, it could at least choke the Gulf long enough to trigger a global energy shock. But what has happened in the last 48 hours is something few experts expected. According to several military briefings, more than 20 Iranian naval vessels have been destroyed in an extremely short period of time. Some were hit in port, others were tracked at sea, and a few simply vanished from operational maps entirely. Then came the moment that shocked even experienced naval observers. For the first time in decades, a U.S. submarine reportedly used a torpedo to sink an enemy warship in combat. Not a missile strike from the air, not a drone attack. A torpedo launched silently from beneath the ocean. The target, according to military statements, was an Iranian warship operating thousands of kilometers away from the main conflict zone, in the Indian Ocean near Sri Lanka. Just weeks earlier, that vessel had taken part in international naval exercises, far from the growing military buildup in the Gulf. Its crew likely believed they were in a relatively safe location. But modern naval warfare has changed dramatically. Submarines can track targets for days without being detected, and satellite networks can monitor movements across entire oceans. If the briefings are accurate, that ship may have been followed for a long time before the attack came. According to operational summaries, a U.S. fast attack submarine fired a Mark 48 torpedo early in the morning. The weapon is designed to detonate beneath a ship's hull, creating a pressure wave powerful enough to break the vessel apart. The result, according to those reports, was immediate. Within minutes, the Iranian warship was sinking beneath the waters of the Indian Ocean. And the footage that surfaced shortly afterward appears to show the underwater detonation erupting directly under the ship. But that strike was only one piece of a much larger operation unfolding across the region. While attention focused on the submarine attack, other events were happening closer to Iran's coastline. Satellite images began circulating, showing multiple Iranian naval facilities burning. Several support ships never even left port before the strikes began. One of the most striking images shared among defense analysts appears to show a massive converted tanker used as a floating naval base, engulfed in flames at its mooring point. These events are reportedly connected to the opening phase of a coordinated campaign, sometimes referred to in briefings as Operation Epic Fury. The objective, according to officials, was simple but decisive: neutralize Iran's ability to project naval power in the region. Cruise missiles, airstrikes, and naval firepower targeted ports, patrol boats, missile launch platforms, and logistics hubs. Videos filmed by commercial vessels passing through the Gulf appear to show Tomahawk missiles flying low across the horizon before distant explosions light up the Iranian coastline. Those images, captured accidentally by civilian crews, quickly spread across the internet and gave the world a rare glimpse into the intensity of the operation's first hours. Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It may seem small, but it helps detailed, long-form analysis like this reach more viewers, especially when covering complex military events that often disappear in the flood of daily headlines. Now back to the situation. Because the scale described in recent briefings is raising serious questions among military observers, Commanders involved in the operation claim that at least 17 Iranian ships were destroyed in the opening phase alone, including one of the country's operational submarines. If those numbers are accurate, it would represent one of the most devastating blows to a regional navy in modern history. Iranian state media, however, has attempted to push back with its own claims, including reports that a U.S. aircraft carrier had been destroyed by ballistic missiles. Those reports were quickly denied by U.S. officials, who stated that the only carrier-type vessel confirmed destroyed was actually Iran's own drone carrier, a ship that had been presented in propaganda videos as a symbol of Iran's expanding naval capabilities. According to the briefings, that vessel was struck early in the operation and is now believed to be resting at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. At the same time, another trend is beginning to draw attention. Iranian missile and drone launches have dropped sharply over the past several days. According to data presented in military briefings, ballistic missile launches have fallen by more than 80% compared with the opening day of the conflict, while drone attacks have decreased by more than 70%. At first glance, that decline might suggest that Iran is losing operational capability or running low on weapons. But not everyone agrees with that interpretation. Some analysts believe the reduction may be tactical. Their argument is simple. Every missile launch reveals its own location. Surveillance drones and satellites can detect the launch within seconds, and precision strikes often follow within minutes. In other words, each attack risks exposing the launcher itself, turning every missile fired into a potential target. And that raises an unsettling question that military planners are now quietly asking behind closed doors. Is the sudden silence from Iranian launch sites a sign of weakness, or is it the calm before a much larger response that has not yet begun? If that theory is correct, Iran might be intentionally pausing large-scale launches while attempting to eliminate surveillance drones or reposition remaining launch platforms. But other analysts are skeptical of that explanation. They argue that if Iran truly had the capability to shoot down large numbers of surveillance aircraft or drones, we would likely already be seeing evidence of that. Instead, reports from the battlefield suggest that U.S. and Israeli aircraft are operating with increasing freedom across parts of Iranian airspace. Another factor may be the destruction of Iran's integrated air defense network in the early phase of the campaign. If radar installations and missile batteries were disabled quickly, it would make it far more difficult for Iranian forces to protect their launch platforms or coordinate large-scale attacks. In that scenario, the decline in missile launches might not be a tactical pause at all. It might simply reflect the fact that fewer launchers remain operational. And this brings us back to the central question that many analysts are now asking. How deep does this operation actually go? Because if the naval losses, air defense disruptions, and missile launcher strikes continue at the current pace, the conflict could be entering an entirely new phase, one where the focus shifts from coastal operations to deeper strikes inside Iranian territory. Recent military briefings hint that such a shift may already be underway. Commanders have described plans to expand operations further inland, targeting additional infrastructure tied to missile production, drone bases, and military logistics hubs. If that expansion occurs, it could dramatically increase the scale of the conflict and potentially trigger new responses from Iran or its regional allies. But there is another layer to this story that has not yet been fully explained. Several senior Iranian leaders and military commanders are reportedly missing, dead or operating from underground bunkers. Communication networks within parts of the Iranian military command structure appear to be disrupted. And if those reports are accurate, the impact on morale and coordination could be significant. The question now circulating among geopolitical analysts is whether this campaign is intended simply to degrade Iran's military capabilities, or whether it represents the opening phase of something even more ambitious. Is this a limited operation designed to neutralize missile and naval threats in the region? As more footage, satellite imagery, and operational briefings continue to emerge, the picture is becoming clearer, but many crucial details are still missing. And that uncertainty is exactly why the next developments in this story may be even more consequential than the dramatic events we have already seen. If you've made it this far into the analysis, take one more second to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It genuinely helps keep this kind of deep dive reporting visible. And stay tuned, because the situation is still evolving in real time. And the next phase of this conflict may reveal answers to questions that right now the world is only beginning to ask. But if we step back and look at the situation from a wider strategic perspective, something even more complex begins to emerge. Because the disappearance of ships, the sudden silence of missile launchers, and the collapse of several layers of Iranian air defense may not simply be isolated battlefield outcomes. They may be pieces of a much larger operational design that has been unfolding quietly for months, perhaps even years, long before the first missiles ever crossed the sky. Military planners often talk about the concept of shaping the battlefield long before open conflict begins. Surveillance satellites, cyber operations, signal intelligence, maritime tracking networks, and covert reconnaissance all operate continuously in the background. By the time the first strike actually happens, many of the critical decisions have already been made. Targets have been mapped, logistics routes identified, command networks analyzed. And when the operation finally begins, the speed of the collapse can appear almost shocking to outside observers who are only seeing the visible phase of the conflict. One of the most revealing developments in recent hours has been the growing evidence that the Iranian naval infrastructure may have been systematically mapped and monitored for a very long time. Several analysts believe that the moment Operation Epic Fury began, strike planners already had extremely detailed intelligence on where Iran's ships were located, which ports were operational, which vessels were at sea, and which ones were undergoing maintenance. That kind of information does not appear overnight. It requires years of maritime tracking, satellite imaging, and signal interception. It also explains why some ships were hit before they even had time to leave port. In modern warfare, the moment a conflict begins, the side with superior intelligence often holds a decisive advantage in the opening hours. But the naval dimension of the story is only one layer of what appears to be unfolding. The collapse of Iranian missile activity over the past several days is raising even deeper questions about the survivability of Iran's long-range strike capability. At the start of the confrontation, Iran demonstrated that it could launch hundreds of missiles within a short period of time. Yet, according to operational updates, those numbers began dropping almost immediately after the first days of combat. Analysts studying the trend have pointed out that the decline is not gradual in the way you might expect if a country were simply running low on ammunition. Instead, the pattern suggests that something else may be happening to the infrastructure behind those launches. Mobile launch vehicles, underground storage facilities, fuel depots, command centers, communication relays. Each of those components is necessary for a missile force to function effectively. And if enough of those pieces are removed from the system, the entire launch network begins to break down. Another critical factor may be the control of the skies. Reports from the battlefield increasingly suggest that U.S. and Israeli aircraft are encountering significantly less resistance from Iranian air defenses than many experts originally predicted. If that assessment is accurate, it means that large portions of Iranian airspace may now be vulnerable to deeper reconnaissance and strike missions. Once air superiority begins to take shape, the tempo of operations can accelerate dramatically. Surveillance drones can remain in the air longer. Strike aircraft can operate closer to strategic targets. Electronic warfare systems can disrupt communications across wider regions. Each new strike then opens the door for the next one, gradually expanding the operational envelope further inland. And this is where the strategic implications become even more serious. Because if air dominance continues to expand, the conflict may move beyond naval bases and missile launchers toward the infrastructure that supports Iran's entire military ecosystem. That includes manufacturing facilities that produce drones and missile components, logistics depots that store fuel and spare parts, command bunkers that coordinate regional operations, even transportation networks used to move weapons between different parts of the country. Once those nodes begin to come under sustained pressure, the ability of a military organization to coordinate large-scale retaliation begins to degrade very quickly. There is also a political dimension unfolding at the same time. Reports have surfaced suggesting that multiple senior Iranian commanders and political figures have either been killed, gone missing, or moved into underground shelters. When leadership networks become fragmented, even a well-equipped military can struggle to coordinate its forces effectively. orders take longer to transmit. Units receive conflicting instructions. Commanders hesitate to move assets without clear authorization. And in the chaos of a rapidly evolving conflict, that hesitation can be just as damaging as the loss of equipment itself. Meanwhile, the regional implications are becoming impossible to ignore. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most critical choke points in global energy supply. Even a temporary disruption in that corridor can send shockwaves through international markets. Shipping companies are already watching the situation carefully. Insurance premiums for vessels passing through the Gulf have historically spiked during periods of heightened tension. If naval operations in the region intensify further, the economic ripple effects could extend far beyond the battlefield. Energy markets, shipping routes, and global trade networks could all feel the pressure almost immediately. But perhaps the most intriguing question is what comes next. Military campaigns rarely end with the first wave of successful strikes. In many cases, the opening phase is designed specifically to remove the enemy's ability to respond effectively. Once that stage is achieved, planners often shift to a second phase focused on deeper objectives. That could mean continued strikes against military infrastructure. It could mean cyber operations targeting financial systems and communication networks. Or it could even involve political pressure designed to exploit internal fractures within the targeted state. Some analysts believe that the rapid destruction of naval assets may have been intended not only to remove a military threat, but also to send a psychological message. Naval forces often carry symbolic weight far beyond their tactical value. Ships represent national power, prestige, and the ability to project influence beyond borders. Losing them in large numbers can have a powerful impact on both domestic morale and international perception. If that psychological effect was part of the calculation behind the operation, it may help explain the speed and intensity of the opening strikes. Because history shows that military operations can escalate quickly once the initial phase begins to succeed. Each new success can encourage planners to push a little further. Each additional strike can create new pressure points that were not part of the original plan. And in a region as volatile as the Middle East, even a limited conflict can expand unexpectedly if other actors decide to intervene. If you are following these developments closely and want to stay informed as new information emerges, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the rapid collapse of Iran's naval presence signals a turning point in the conflict? Or could we be seeing only the beginning of a much larger confrontation? The coming days may reveal whether this operation remains a limited strike campaign or evolves into one of the most significant military escalations the region has seen in decades.